And actually, I still get that sense of excitement about being in a huge mob of LGBTQ people. I think it's wonderful.
There's a power in being there in a collective, being together, taking up space.
I just felt like I'd never felt before, like that I have this community that's going to back me.
It's the sense of home, because sometimes we don't have that home. You know, we have our chosen family.
They are the powerful and poignant pride memories of this group of LGBTQ people we've brought together to mark 50 years since the first march took place in the UK. 1972, those flared footsteps were taken. How far have we come since then, and how far do we still have to go? Matthew came out as gay a little bit later in the 1980s, during a time when the community was facing discrimination.
If you were at Pride, you were marching at Pride, and the people who were watching may not be on your side. I mean, often you'd get jeered at. I mean, and you'd respond in a suitably homosexual way. Just being there, being visible, was a protest, because it was a protest against the heterosexual society which said that we didn't exist or that we weren't worthy.
A time compounded by the HIV/AIDS crisis.
That queer community was one where grief and loss and mourning were a huge part of it. And I sometimes look back on those years and go, how did any of us survive, not just the disease, but the trauma of going to that many funerals?
For Roxy, it was the trauma of not seeing there was a community she could fit into. Section 28 banning the promotion of homosexuality, particularly within schools.
Looking back, I think that it inevitably played a part in me staying in the closet, in me feeling that being gay was shameful, that it was something to be hidden away.
As editor-in-chief of a magazine for queer women, she gets the importance of visibility.
There's a lot more representation of LGBTQIA people and of lesbians in particular than there was when I was at school. So that in itself is positive. Still, though, there needs to be greater diversity in representation. We don't have as many stories, for instance, of lesbians of colour, or of non-binary people, or of bisexual people.
Arthur made himself seen when he came out publicly as trans on 5 News 3 years ago.
I'm transgender and I'm yet to have my first appointment on the NHS.
He spoke about trans healthcare then, having waited years for an appointment at a gender clinic for medical treatment, which in the end he had to get privately.
People who are referred now potentially can be waiting 10, 15 years for their first appointment. So the idea that trans people are being rushed into treatment, that hormones are being given out like sweeties to kids on street corners, not happening.
There was an equally long wait to get this, a birth certificate which legally recognises his gender.
It was a relief, because there's always like a part of you that thinks, oh God, what if they're going to turn around and say, no, you're not a man, actually apply again in a few years, because I know some people who had been told.
I mean, is that a worry for you?
Yeah, it was, because it's being seen by a panel of strangers that have never met you. They're literally just looking through your documents and seeing whether it meets their criteria.
Recognising who you are, difficult for Aisha too.
I was brought up Muslim, and I grew up predominantly in Nigeria with the rest of my extended family, and I was brought up to think, you know, being queer was un-African. It's something that other people did. It's the, you know, within the Western world, you can't be gay.
She runs a business which caters specifically for queer people, a word long reclaimed by the community.
For me, when I use the word gay or LGBTQ, for me, it always tends to remind me of gay white people. Whereas queer, for example, when I hear queer or I see in different places, it tends to be a bit more intersectional. It tends to encompass everybody.
Prides are returning this year after a pause, a moment to mark parades of the past.
Oh my God, the progress we've made is wonderful.
Something to celebrate.
Something to celebrate, absolutely. And that's what Pride is, isn't it?
And highlights a community which keeps marching forward. Alan Jenkins, 5 News.